Hello friends, and welcome to another midweek message, which evidently has become the midweek drive. My name is Wayne. Glad you're here. Thanks for tuning in. I was reading an article earlier today on positivepsychology.com, and the article is on delayed gratification. Delayed gratification, another term for that would be self-control, or the ability to wait for something that you really want to happen. So delayed gratification is maybe there's a reward for something that you're going to do, but you are willing to wait on the reward while you work towards that reward. Or perhaps there is something that should only happen in certain circumstances, and so you are willing to wait on those circumstances to come around before you have to have that thing that you're waiting for. Like I said, another term for this might be the term self-control. Anyway, point being, this article says knowing how to delay pleasure in an effort to serve a more important and more gratifying goal makes all the difference in achieving that goal. The ability to self-regulate will directly impact the outcomes of all those future plans. In a culture surrounded by the messaging that you can lose the discomfort right now, the ability to wait for a long-term reward is less attractive. And it goes on to say, in the past, the concepts of delayed gratification, self-control, and self-regulation have all been used interchangeably and even inconsistently. The ability to delay the impulse for an immediate reward to receive a more favorable reward at a later time is a standard definition of delayed gratification. Studies have shown that the ability to delay reward is present in highly successful people. Wow, that's huge news. I mean, we should already know that, right? That the ability to wait, the ability to have self-control, all of that plays a huge part in success, right? But I think it's something that even though we intuitively know, we nonetheless forget. And let me give just a couple of examples. There was a time when young people would get married, start a family, buy their first house, and it would be like a small house, very budget friendly, and they'd live in that house for a little while, and then they would sell that house and move up to maybe a bigger house. And that process would continue until they got into the house of their dreams. But nowadays, it appears that people just go out and they buy the house of their dreams right to begin with. And they are taking on huge mortgages in order to do that. I went to look at vehicles not long ago. And a truck nowadays, it's like $50,000 or $60,000, and that's for almost what I would consider a really base model truck. If you want to get a really nice truck, you're talking closer to $70,000, which to me is a lot of money. And now you can get a car loan for 8 years. There's no emphasis really on saving money anymore. The emphasis nowadays is on leveraging your credit. to the greatest extent. So we live in a credit-driven society where you don't really wait for anything that you want anymore. You don't really work towards anything anymore. You don't save so that you can buy that thing that you want once you have saved up the money. Now you go get what you want and you pay for it on the back end. That's a symptom of the inability to delay gratification. I remember growing up that abstinence when it comes to sexuality was a really big priority. You needed to wait until you got married. You needed to have self-control. And nowadays, if you even say that, you are accused of pushing this idea of purity culture. And we're told nowadays that that's damaging to people, that purity culture is damaging to people. And there's this idea out there that it's impossible to delay gratification in the area of sexuality. And so now we've gone the complete other end of the spectrum, and whatever desire strikes you, you pursue that with gusto. There's no self-control in that area. There's no waiting in that area. And it's getting worse. Fast food. And I have to tell you, I mean, my family is really guilty of not wanting to put in the work, right, to eat healthy and to eat right. We want the quick meal. That's part of living in a very busy culture. But I'll tell you, I think I figured out a few weeks ago, school had started back. My wife started back to teaching. She's taking college classes at night. I'm busy with work. Kids are now busy with school. It was just really easy for us to run through the drive-thru or go get something to eat rather than, going home and preparing anything. I sat down and started looking at my budget and figured out we were spending hundreds of dollars eating out. Why? Because it was quick and it was easy and it was convenient. There was no delayed gratification in our lives when it came to food. We didn't want to put in any effort to try to prepare what we were going to eat, mainly because we just didn't have the time. And so we were getting the quick fix. And studies have shown that eating like that isn't healthy anyway, right? So delayed gratification, there's not much of it in the world anymore. People come out of college and they want to go straight into like their dream job. They don't want to have to work their way up any kind of a ladder. They don't want to have to put in the years and gain the experience. They just feel like they should go into that dream job right away. And a lot of times if they're not able to go into that dream job, they just give up and they go do something else or do nothing at all. Delayed gratification. No. Plastic surgery. And weight loss. Another big issue where this shows up. Weight loss is a pretty scientific thing for most people, not for everybody, but for most people. When you burn more calories every day than you take in, you lose weight. But since we have a problem with self-control, We don't really want to control the way that we eat. But we do want to look a certain way. And so we'll try this fad or this fad or this fad for a little while. This diet, this diet, this diet, this little workout program, this little workout program, this little workout program, in hopes that in 30 days we can lose 30 pounds. Which that's not even safe, even if it were possible. We want everything to happen quickly. When, especially in the area of weight loss and health and things like that, you know, it takes years to pack on the pounds, and it takes years to get rid of them. And so you have to develop a healthy lifestyle, and you enjoy the benefits of that healthy lifestyle in the future, but you got to put in the work right now. And that's, I believe that that's part of the problem, is that we want the rewards, right? And we want the benefits without the work. And I would suggest there is a lot of people these days who say that we're raising a generation of young people who are entitled, who feel like they are owed something. But I would suggest to you that they learned that from somewhere. And I feel like they learned it from those of us who are old enough to be parents, and maybe even our parents. We've somehow gotten the idea in our heads that we shouldn't have to wait for anything, that we should have what we want right now because we deserve it. It's our right. And so delayed gratification is one of those areas that is a huge weakness, I believe, in the culture that we live in. We don't want to wait. And that's a really interesting thing when you think about the fact that people in the Bible waited for years for rewards or blessings or for promises to be fulfilled. Some of them believed and trusted and had faith, and yet never really experienced the full extent of their reward or their promises being fulfilled here on earth. You know, Noah, when God told him to build the ark, God promised him that there was going to be rain. Earth had never really seen rain. That was going to be a new thing. But Noah worked for decades, for years, before he ever saw that first drop of rain. Moses, God sent him back into Egypt because he was going to lead the people out of Egypt, God's people who were in slavery, to the land of promise, the land that God had promised Abraham. Important point, God promised Abraham that he would make him a great nation, that his name would be great, and that all of the land where he stepped foot was going to be his land. But what you have to understand is that Abraham had like one kid that God had provided for him, through which all of this was going to happen. And so Abraham didn't see the great nation. Abraham never possessed all of the land. He nonetheless trusted God's promises, and he followed God and obeyed God anyway. Now back to Moses. God promised Moses, hey, he told him, he said, go in, I want you to lead my people out. And Moses led the people out. Moses was faithful to God. It was difficult, it was hard. The people were a rebellious people. They didn't want to follow Moses' leadership, and they didn't want to follow God's leadership. Nonetheless, he did the work, and he stayed faithful to God. But an important point to remember is that Moses never actually stepped foot into the promised land himself. He led the people right up to the edge of the promised land, but because of his disobedience while leading the people, God wouldn't let him go in. But was he upset with God? No. Did he turn his back on God? No. He knew that he was going to receive a reward in eternity, and he was waiting for that reward. He didn't need to see that promised land because he was waiting for something that was better. The Bible's full of these kinds of stories. Paul, in the New Testament, who used to be Saul before he became a believer, Saul had it all. He was a Pharisee, which meant he had a lot of popularity, a lot of prestige, and he was probably pretty rich. Came from a well-off family. He was a Roman citizen, so he had privileges that other people didn't have. But when he became a believer in Jesus, he gave up every bit of that in order to travel around planning churches and trying to build the kingdom of God. He gave up all of that. But Paul makes it very clear in a lot of his letters that what he's living for, and the reason he's doing all of this, is not because he's expecting some kind of reward or benefit from it here on earth. He's expecting his reward for his faithfulness in eternity. He's looking forward to heaven. And so, listen, Paul lives his entire life in a state of delayed gratification because he's waiting for a reward that's going to come in eternity. So he's got to make it through his entire life, however long that's going to be, before he ever gets to experience the blessings that God's promised him. Paul's a perfect example of someone who was able to delay gratification. Jesus lived 33 years on this earth, and get this, from the time he was born, he knew what his purpose was. He knew why he was here. He knew he was going to be the Savior of the world. But do you remember at the beginning of his ministry, when he was about 30 years old, his mother asked him to perform a miracle, and he told her, he said, "My time has not yet come." It would be 3 years before Jesus would be crucified for the sins of mankind. That's his time. It was 3 years before that happened. Jesus knew how to wait for the right moment to do things and to act. He knew he knew what he was going to have to go through, and he knew the reward on the other side of that. He knew he was going to be resurrected. He knew that he was going to be the anointed heir of all that God has made. He knew he was going to sit on the right hand of the Father in glory. In Hebrews chapter 12, it says that Jesus endured the cross, despising its shame, for the joy that was set before him. So in other words, Jesus knew what was coming, and he was willing to go through all of the struggle and all of the strife, all of the pain, all of the suffering, because he was waiting for the joy that was on the other side of all of that. He was able to delay gratification and wait for the reward. Jesus is a perfect example of a person who is able to delay gratification because something greater is on the horizon. So I want to read a passage to you from Hebrews chapter 11 that talks about all of these folks in Hebrews 11 that we call the heroes of the faith, or the hall of faith is what we call Hebrews 11. All of these folks in the Bible who were able to delay gratification and trust the promises of God and wait for something greater. Here's what it says in verse 13 of Hebrews 11. These all died in faith, although they had not received the things that were promised. These all died in faith, although they had not received the things that were promised. But they saw them from a distance, it says, greeted them, and confessed that they were foreigners and temporary residents on the earth. Now, as you think about your life, how good are you at waiting? What is your patience like? How good are you at controlling yourself for something better in the future? Putting off what you want today so that you can have something even better tomorrow. And how are you at trusting and believing the promises of God, even if today it doesn't look like those promises are going to come true? Do you have the ability to trust Him and to believe and to welcome His promises from a distance? To see yourself as a foreigner and a temporary resident on the earth. I'll tell you, brothers and sisters and friends, I believe that part of the reason we have such a hard time waiting on good things is because regardless of what we say we believe about God, I feel like a lot of us think that this world is the best it's going to get. And so we want everything this world has to offer, and we want it now. We don't want to have to wait because we feel like we only have a short amount of time on this earth. And so we don't want to waste any time. We want to enjoy the reward while we can. But I would encourage you to remember, especially if you're a believer, that this world is like the pregame show for the Super Bowl of eternity. We're getting ready for something even better. As much hype as there is in this world, this is only preparing us for eternity. And so that needs to be the promises, the rewards, the blessings, the benefits that we are working towards and looking for. We don't live for right now. We live for tomorrow. We live for eternity. So even if you don't receive today the things that you feel like you should receive, remember that there's a greater day coming with a greater reward and a greater blessing. So you just keep being faithful. You just keep trusting God. And you just keep living a life that points other people to Him. And the reward will come at the right time. Delayed gratification. Something we all could probably work a little bit better at. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this message, and I hope it's encouraged you. Know that I'm praying for you, and hope you have a great week. Hope you stay healthy and safe, and pray that God will bless you and keep you and make His face shine upon you. So I'll see you next time on the Midweek Message. Bye.